Okay, so today let's dive into something that's really intriguing and maybe, I don't know about you, but I find it a little out there. We're talking about the power of silence. And we're looking at some excerpts from a talk by Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Okay.
And he makes some pretty bold claims about what silence can do.
Yeah.
Like literally rewiring your brain, attracting the things that you desire.
Right.
Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes my mind feels like, a noisy subway station at rush hour, thoughts just whizzing by in every direction.
Yeah.
So the idea that silence could actually help me kind of like wrangle those thoughts and maybe even upgrade my reality? Well, I'm curious. I have to admit, I'm a little skeptical too.
Yeah, what's so fascinating about this, at least to me, is how Dr. Dispenza, he goes beyond just saying, like, meditation is good for you.
Yeah.
He really dives into the why and the how.
Okay.
And he really emphasizes that it's not just about the absence of noise, but about cultivating this deep inner stillness.
So it's more than just like putting on noise-canceling headphones. It's about quieting the internal chatter too.
Exactly. And he even ties this inner stillness to what's happening in our brains. He talks about how it shifts our brainwave patterns into what are known as alpha and theta states, which are linked to creativity and even subconscious reprogramming.
Okay, hold on. Subconscious reprogramming. That sounds pretty intense. What does that even mean, like in practical terms?
Yeah, so think about it this way. You know those aha moments you have where a solution just seems to come out of nowhere?
Uh-huh.
Those often happen when our minds are in these quieter brainwave states, like during deep relaxation, or as, Dr. Dispenza argues, through intentional silence.
So it's like we're accessing a different level of thinking when we're not bombarded by constant mental noise.
Exactly. And that's where, this whole idea of rewiring your brain and attracting what you desire comes in.
Okay, I think I need a little bit more on that. How does silence actually help you, say, achieve a goal or bring something that you want into your life?
Well, so his idea is that our thoughts emit a kind of energy signal, right? And those signals can either attract or repel the things that we want.
So if I'm like constantly stressing about a presentation at work, I'm actually like sending out signals that might attract a negative outcome.
That's the idea. It's like tuning your radio to a station that's constantly broadcasting anxiety and doubt. You're going to keep hearing more of the same.
Yeah.
But silence, true inner stillness, allows us to consciously change the station, so to speak.
So instead of like focusing on my fear of like messing up this presentation, I could use silence to kind of shift my energy towards visualizing a successful outcome, and that might actually help me attract that success.
Precisely. You're changing the frequency you're broadcasting from one of lack and limitation to one of abundance and possibility.
Okay, that's starting to make a little bit more sense, but let's be real, finding even 5 minutes of peace in my day can feel impossible sometimes.
Right.
So does Dr. Dispenza address that? Like, do we have to become hermits and live in total silence to reap these benefits?
Well, that's the good news. He actually emphasizes that you don't need hours of meditation to make a difference.
Okay.
It's about quality over quantity.
Okay.
Even short bursts of intentional stillness can create really powerful ripples of change.
That's a relief. So it's more about finding those pockets of stillness throughout the day rather than like overhauling our entire lives.
Exactly. Maybe it's 5 minutes of mindful breathing before you start your workday, or a quiet walk in nature during your lunch break.
Right.
The key is to be intentional about creating that space for inner stillness.
Okay. That feels much more doable than trying to become a Zen master overnight.
Right.
But I have to admit, even when I do manage to like quiet my mind for a few minutes, it feels like a whole bunch of other stuff just bubbles up to the surface, like worries, anxieties, that awkward thing I said 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Is that normal? Or am I doing silence wrong?
It's totally normal. In fact, Dr. Dispenza would say it's actually a good thing.
A good thing? How so? It doesn't feel very good when it's happening.
Well, he compares it to like cleaning out a cluttered room. You have to deal with the mess before you can create a more peaceful and spacious environment, right?
So facing those uncomfortable thoughts and emotions is actually part of the process of creating inner stillness.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's like clearing out the mental clutter to make space for something new and positive to emerge.
Yeah, I like the way you put that. It's like mental decluttering.
Yeah.
Out with the old, in with the new.
Right.
But I'm guessing this process of, confronting our inner stuff isn't always like easy, is it?
Yeah, you're right. It can be challenging, but the rewards can be well worth the effort.
Right.
Remember those benefits we talked about earlier, like rewiring your brain, attracting what you desire?
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Dispenza argues that those benefits become much more accessible when we're willing to do this inner work.
So it's not just about like sitting in silence, it's about using that silence as an opportunity to kind of get to know ourselves better, even the messy parts.
Exactly. And that deeper self-awareness can then ripple out into all areas of our lives.
Yeah.
Our relationships, our work, even our physical and mental health.
Okay, now you've really piqued my interest. So what specific benefits does Dr. Dispenza say we might experience as we kind of delve deeper into this practice of silence? Let's unpack those next.
Well, he touches on a lot of potential benefits, but I think a good place to start is with one that's probably on everyone's mind these days: stress reduction.
Yeah, I could definitely use a little less of that in my life.
For sure. And according to Dr. Dispenza, when our minds are, constantly racing, it really takes a toll on our bodies. So it's like our nervous system is stuck in overdrive.
That makes sense. I know when I'm stressed, I definitely feel it physically. My shoulders are tense. I can't sleep. I basically live on coffee.
Exactly. And those physical symptoms are often accompanied by, mental and emotional distress, anxiety, irritability, difficulty concentrating.
Right.
But Dr. Dispenza argues that when we cultivate this inner stillness, we're essentially hitting the reset button on our entire system.
So it's not just about feeling calmer mentally, but about actually shifting our physiology.
Precisely. When we're in that state of deep inner quiet, our heart rate slows, our blood pressure decreases, and those stress hormones, like cortisol, they plummet.
It's like giving our bodies a much needed break from this constant barrage of stress hormones.
Exactly. And because chronic stress is a major contributor to so many health problems, heart disease, insomnia, digestive issues, it stands to reason that reducing stress through silence could have really wide-ranging positive impacts on our well-being.
Yeah, that's a pretty compelling argument for incorporating a little more silence into our lives. Speaking of well-being, Dr. Dispenza also talks about the benefits of silence for our relationships, which I thought was interesting. I'm kind of curious about this one because at first glance, it seems a little, counterintuitive. How does being quieter in my own head lead to better connections with other people?
Well, think about it this way. When we're constantly caught up in our own mental chatter, we're not truly present with the people around us, right?
Yeah.
We might be hearing their words, but we're not really listening. We're just waiting for our turn to talk, or we're busy formulating our response in our heads.
Ouch. Yeah, I've definitely been guilty of that.
Right, but when we cultivate inner stillness, it creates a space for deeper listening and more genuine connection.
Okay.
We can be more present with the other person, more empathetic to their feelings, and more attuned to their, nonverbal cues.
So it's not just about being quiet, it's about using that quiet to become a better listener.
Exactly. And that enhanced listening can have a ripple effect in all of our relationships. Romantic partners, friends, family members, even colleagues.
Right, because when we truly feel heard and understood, it deepens the connection and creates a sense of trust and intimacy.
Precisely. And that's something that, I think most of us are really craving, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah, for sure. So incorporating even these short bursts of silence into our day could not only benefit us individually, but also strengthen our bonds with the people that we care about most.
Absolutely. It's such a simple yet really powerful practice with the potential to transform both our inner and outer worlds.
Okay, so we've talked about stress reduction, we've talked about improved relationships, but I know Dr. Dispenza doesn't stop there.
You're right. He goes even further and suggests that as we deepen our practice of silence, we may start to experience a profound shift in our relationship with something else that often feels very fixed and unchanging: time itself.
Okay, now that is fascinating. Time is such a constant. How can silence possibly change our experience of it?
Well, think about it. Most of us experience time in a very linear way, right?
Right.
We're either dwelling on the past, worrying about the future, or just rushing from one task to the next, constantly trying to manage time.
Oh, guilty as charged. I feel like I'm constantly battling the clock, trying to squeeze in just one more thing before the day is over.
Exactly. But Dr. Dispenza suggests that as we cultivate this inner silence, we start to touch a different dimension of ourselves, one that exists beyond the constraints of linear time.
So it's like we're accessing a part of ourselves that's eternal, timeless.
Exactly. And as we connect with this deeper aspect of our being, our experience of time in the everyday world often starts to shift as well.
How so? What does that shift actually feel like?
Well, we may find that we're less anxious about the future, less haunted by the past, and more able to fully inhabit the present moment.
So it's not that time itself changes, but rather our relationship to it.
Precisely. We may still have deadlines and schedules and commitments, but we're no longer like enslaved by them,
Right.
We can move through our days with a greater sense of ease, presence, and even joy.
It's like we're tapping into that flow state that like athletes and artists often talk about, where time seems to either like slow down and disappear altogether.
Exactly. And because we're no longer constantly battling against the clock or trying to cram more into each day, we often find that we have more time and energy for the things that truly matter to us.
That makes sense. When we're more present, we're more efficient, we're more focused, and we're more able to appreciate like the beauty and richness of each moment.
Exactly.
Wow, this is pretty powerful stuff.
It is. And this shift in our relationship with time can have ripple effects in all areas of our lives, right? Reducing that stress and anxiety, improving our relationships, and even enhancing our creativity and productivity.
Wow, that's quite a list. It sounds like cultivating a deeper relationship with silence could be a real game changer in so many ways.
It certainly has the potential to be. And there's another fascinating aspect of Dr. Dispenza's talk that I think is worth, digging into a little bit deeper.
Don't leave me hanging. What is it?
Well, he delves into this idea that as we deepen our practice of silence, we may start to experience a really profound shift in our perception of reality itself.
Okay, now that is intriguing. Perception of reality. What does that even mean, like in practical terms?
So it's a bit of a heady concept, but the idea is that as we connect more deeply with that silent awareness within, the world around us starts to seem less solid, less fixed, and more interconnected.
So instead of seeing the world as like this collection of separate objects and events, we start to perceive the underlying energy or consciousness that connects it all.
That's the gist of it, yes. And this shift in perception can be incredibly empowering because it helps us realize that we're not limited by the fixed, solid reality that we once believed in.
It's like realizing that we have more agency than we thought, that we're not just these passive observers in our own lives.
Exactly. And this realization can be incredibly empowering because it opens us up to the possibility of creating a reality that's more in alignment with our deepest desires and aspirations.
So it's not about denying the challenges or difficulties of life, but rather approaching them from a place of greater awareness, possibility, and even a sense of playfulness.
Precisely. It's about realizing that we have more choices than we often realize, and that life itself can become a canvas for creative expression and joyful exploration.
I love that idea. It's not about escaping from reality, but rather about experiencing it more fully and engaging with it in a more conscious and intentional way.
Exactly. And as we continue to cultivate this inner silence and allow this deeper awareness to kind of permeate our lives, the idea is that our relationships will naturally transform as well.
Okay, so what does a silent-infused relationship look like?
Well, it's not about, finding the perfect partner or magically resolving all conflicts. It's more about showing up with greater presence, authenticity, and compassion in all of our interactions.
So less ego, more empathy.
Exactly. And as we become more comfortable with who we are at our core, we naturally attract people and experiences that resonate with our true selves.
It's like we're emitting a different frequency, one that draws in connections that are more aligned with our values, passions, and aspirations.
Precisely. And the relationships that we do have, whether they're romantic, platonic, or familial, often become deeper, more supportive, and less burdened by drama and unnecessary conflict.
Because we're not bringing all that inner noise and baggage into our interactions.
Exactly. We're better able to communicate our needs clearly, set healthy boundaries, and approach disagreements with greater understanding and compassion.
It's like silence becomes the foundation for more authentic and fulfilling connections.
It really does. And this sense of interconnectedness often extends beyond our personal relationships as well. Dr. Dispenza suggests that as we cultivate this inner silence, we often feel a much deeper sense of connection to the world around us as a whole.
So it's not just about our individual experience, but about recognizing our place in the larger, web of life.
Exactly. We might feel more compelled to get involved in our communities, to contribute to causes that we care about, or to simply live in a way that's more aligned with the well-being of the planet and all its inhabitants.
It's like we're shifting from a mindset of scarcity and separation to one of abundance and interconnectedness.
Precisely. And that shift in perspective can have a profound impact on our actions, our choices, and our overall impact on the world.
Yeah, it's like this beautiful ripple effect.
It is. And it all circles back to this idea that cultivating inner silence is so much more than just a personal practice.
Yeah.
It's a way of contributing to a more peaceful, compassionate, and interconnected world.
This is all so incredibly powerful and inspiring, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I want to make sure we kind of circle back and touch on one more important point that Dr. Dispenza brings up, and that is the potential challenges of embracing silence. We talked earlier about how, facing those uncomfortable thoughts and emotions can be a part of the process, but what other hurdles might someone encounter on this journey inward?
One of the biggest things, and he's pretty upfront about this, is that our minds, they're often pretty resistant to silence.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Our brains, they're so used to being stimulated,
Right.
Scrolling, watching, listening to something constantly.
Mine is on.
So when we actually give our minds a break from all that input, it can be really uncomfortable, at least at first.
We don't know what to do with ourselves almost.
Precisely. Our minds, they might start racing, trying to fill the void with, thoughts, worries, to-do lists, anything to avoid that unfamiliar stillness.
So it's we've become addicted to the noise and distraction, and breaking that addiction takes effort.
That's a great way to put it. And like any addiction, it takes time, it takes patience to rewire those patterns and create new, healthier habits.
So what can we do when that resistance pops up? How do we actually cultivate a deeper sense of, ease with silence?
Well, Dr. Dispenza, he suggests starting small and being kind to yourself. Instead of, aiming for an hour-long meditation retreat right off the bat, just begin with 5 minutes of focused breathing.
So it's about gradually building up our tolerance for stillness, just like we would with physical exercise.
Exactly. And, another challenge that he talks about is that silence can sometimes bring up difficult emotions or memories that we've been avoiding.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit earlier, the idea that it's mental decluttering.
Right, exactly. And while it's really important to acknowledge and process those emotions, it can feel overwhelming at times.
It can. So what do we do when those intense feelings surface? Should we just sit with them and hope for the best?
Well, he really emphasizes the importance of self-compassion here. It's okay to acknowledge that it's tough. Be gentle with ourselves as we kind of navigate those challenging emotions.
And if it feels too intense, we can always step away from the silence for a little bit and come back to it when we're feeling, a bit more centered.
Absolutely. This is not about forcing ourselves to endure discomfort, but rather about approaching the practice with a sense of curiosity and kindness.
So embracing silence is a journey, not a destination.
100%. Yeah.
And there will be a few bumps along the way.
There will be bumps, for sure. But,
Yeah,
as with any journey worth taking, the rewards can be profound.
they can. Speaking of rewards, I'm curious, beyond these specific benefits that we've discussed, what does Dr. Dispenza see as the ultimate outcome of cultivating this inner silence?
That's a great question. And it's interesting because he doesn't necessarily frame it as an outcome in the traditional sense.
What do you mean?
Well, it's not about achieving a specific goal or acquiring something outside of ourselves.
Okay.
Instead, he suggests that the true gift of silence is the rediscovery of something that's already present within us.
Like a sense of inner peace or wholeness.
Exactly. He believes that beneath all the noise, all the distractions, all the layers of conditioning, there's this deep wellspring of peace, joy, contentment that's always been there.
It's we're not actually creating anything new, but rather removing the obstacles that prevent us from experiencing the fullness of who we already are.
Beautifully said. It's about coming home to ourselves, to the present moment, to the simple yet really profound joy of just being alive.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful way to think about it. It's not about becoming someone else or achieving some external measure of success, but about reconnecting with the truth of who we are at our core.
100%. And as we cultivate this inner sanctuary of silence, as we allow ourselves to simply be without judgment or resistance, he suggests that something really remarkable happens.
What's that?
We naturally become a source of peace, love, and inspiration for others.
So the transformation that begins within us starts to ripple outwards, impacting the world around us.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
our very presence becomes a gift to the world, a beacon of calm amidst all the chaos.
That's an incredibly inspiring thought. It makes me realize that embracing silence isn't just a selfish act, but it's a way of contributing to a more peaceful and compassionate world.
Exactly. And the more of us who kind of embark on this journey inward, the stronger those ripples of peace and compassion will become.
Well, that is a beautiful note to end on. So for those of you listening, I encourage you to explore the power of silence in your own lives. Whether it's, 5 minutes of mindful breathing, a quiet walk in nature, or simply allowing yourself to be fully present in a moment of stillness. See what unfolds.
Yeah, you might be surprised by what you discover within the quiet.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive, but we'll leave you with this final thought-provoking question to kind of ponder.
If silence really does hold the key to unlocking our fullest potential and creating a more peaceful world, what step can you take today to invite a little more of it into your life?